What do you do when you've got an impossible choice to make? What and who are you willing to sacrifice in order to do it? These are the questions that episode 5 of Star City asks, and we get some pretty shocking twists and turns along the way before we get some pretty clear and definitive answers for the outcomes, or at least the direction some of the characters are going to take for the rest of the season. This show has been solid since episode 1, but I think it's safe to say each week the show is actually getting better. From the end of episode 3, this has had us as an audience on a knife edge. We know who the American spy is, and it's just a matter of time before the characters in the show start piecing it all together for themselves and catching up. And that's what happens in episode 5. So if you haven't seen it, this will contain spoilers, but as always, I'm Al, this is the Geek in Review, and let's talk about Star City Season 1, Episode 5. Now if you haven't done it already, subscribe to the channel, and if you make it all the way to the end of the video, leave a like too. So Episode 5 opens literally where Episode 4 left off. Pretty tough but quick decisions to make. Exiting the bathroom, she immediately asks Tanya when Valia is going to be back, and puts 2 and 2 together about the woman who Valia was talking to that Tanya mentioned when they were in Moscow, and starts to ask Tanya in more details about this woman, you know, what she looked like, was she foreign, that kind of thing. Whether she's trying to confirm her worst fears or gather evidence against Valia, we'll find out later on in the episode. So sooner or later, she's going to have a decision to make, and if and when she does turn in Valia, she has to know that Tanya is going to get interrogated at least, and she does suggest that Tanya should disappear for a few days visiting her parents. So on some level, it seems that Irina actually cares about Tanya, and does actually confess to her what she does for a living, and starts to remove the bugs from their apartment in order to prove her point. So there's going to be consequences here for both of them along the line at some point. And Tanya does kind of seem shocked that the state would be doing this to her and Valia, but I guess the state knowing all your personal secrets is a bit of a mindfuck at the end of the day, listening into your day-to-day lives 24 hours a day for months, if not years at a time. But Irina offers to help get her out of the Star City area and get her to Moscow, and what I found interesting here is Irina doesn't really have that sort of power or resources. Now we find out later on in the episode why she might have more than we thought, but in my notes for this episode I was like, who's she going to call in a favour from in order to make this happen and help this woman disappear? And when we find out who that person is or who that person might be, it's a pretty shocking revelation for the character and the show. But back at work, she at least tries to go about her day-to-day normally, or at least trying to pretend to be normal, because what she can do is edit the recording of the conversation with Tanya the night before, which we've seen her do earlier on with the conversation that she had about her child's father a few episodes ago. She uses her position to basically get fake papers for Tanya to travel and leave the Star City area, and by travel, of course, I mean escape. So she's really putting a lot on the line here, especially with her nosy friend watching over her shoulder. Because I keep saying, and I've said it since episode 1, this is spies on spying, and everyone's got to watch her. So she's going to have to do a lot of creative explaining. So when trying to get one over of them is a bit of an issue, but she does it masterfully by playing off the fact that she's following a line of investigation from the Colonel. So the Colonel can't effectively be wrong, we know that already, and that was a stroke of genius. Is the scene where she has to approach a man and basically has to distract him, and she says, hey, are you telling me that the records you have are correct and the Colonel's wrong? And the guy basically shits his pants and asks Irina not to cover up the mistake he's made, even though the fact he's made no mistake at all. So they just have to jump through hoops, and yeah, it really does reflect how this world works. We see how tight security is later on when Valia comes home late from a meeting in Moscow and risks getting reported and investigated, so this world is still under super control lockdown when it comes to security. He does manage to talk his way out of it like Irina simply by using his status, so I guess that's one of the reasons that the American recruited him. Irina later on meets Tanya with fake papers allowing her to travel and reach Moscow, and is set up quite well for her to get out of this situation before it explodes in her face. Irina says that she is going to join her on her leg of the voyage once she reaches Moscow, with plans to get her out the country, because they both know that Valia, once this gets discovered, is a dead man if he's lucky, and is going to be tortured considerably for quite a while if he's not. All while doing this, Irina is still reporting to the Colonel, and it seems that her friend might have turned on her as well, which, hey, shocking setup, I know. The friend is handed over the tape, and the Colonel now knows of the relationship between Irina, Tanya and Irina's daughter, so it seems that the curtains might finally have been drawn for her. So she's now faced with having some difficult questions to answer. Irina does have a cover story though, and explains all this, that she suspects that Valia is the spy for the Americans, so again, a total stroke of genius, and she literally hands him over on a platter, which I didn't see coming. She's thrown him under the bus to save herself and Tanya, and save the Colonel's skin too when you think about it, because she's just done the Colonel a massive favour in putting her about 10 steps ahead of her own investigation. So she's back in the Colonel's good books, and the clock is ticking for Valia at this point in this episode. Now I'll get back to the Irina, the Tanya and the Valia stuff later on, but there's other things in this episode that happened that I want to cover as well. So obviously enraged about what's happened to Sergei, the chief designer goes straight away to the Colonel after he was imprisoned last week. Of course, he needs Sergei for his long-term plan, and these two are really playing chess with each other in this scene. The chief designer literally has all the power because he can't be replaced, but the Colonel here does have something that the chief designer wants. Sergei is released, but we don't actually see what the chief designer agreed to in order to get the result that he needed, so I guess we're going to find out the cost of this later on in the season. He later briefs Sasha and the other members of the team about how he's going to pull this all off, using the cover as a launch for a weather satellite and hiding them in the modified diving bell for the trip to Venus, so they can board that, then board the rocket, and then go into space. And they've clearly been doing a lot of prep and planning for this, as they've got all of the parts in place for them to rendezvous with other craft in orbit, refuel and all of that stuff. The chief designer basically tells them that at the point that this does get discovered, he's going to play the whole "it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission" card, which is a pretty bold and risky move. But one thing that's been bothering me since we found out about the destination for this secret plan in the ending of For All Mankind Season 5, which, if you haven't seen it, I've done a video on about how these two shows tie together, is what exactly does he want on Venus? It's uninhabitable, so what does he hope to find there? And surely if it's to advance the Soviets' mission in space, Mars, from what we know in reality and in the For All Mankind show, is a much more viable candidate for any sort of extended human stay or exploration. Valia manages to get back into Star City, as I said, and is working to train the crew for the Venus mission, and it occurred to me that him being on this ship, not Sasha, is a win-win for them both, as Sasha doesn't want to command the mission again, and Valia is literally trapped by his own situation here on Earth. Now, we know how this episode ends, and it was kind of a bit obvious once you got closer to the end of it, but yeah, I initially thought it was going to be Sasha and Valia that swapped positions here. But let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. But the training isn't going well, and they all seem to know it. Lakshmi, the Indian scientist, has literally days to train for a 9-month mission, which is life or death, and she's holding all the cards because she's the life support expert and she's literally irreplaceable. So I did think that Valia might end up replacing her, but they point out quite clearly that that can't be done. Later on in the episode, Tanya visits Valia at work, so he knows straight away that something is wrong, and that she flat out tells him they know what he's been up to and both their lives are now effectively over. He wants to get them out using his American contacts, but Tanya doesn't believe he's capable of it and follows the plan that Irina set up for her earlier on. At this point, the Colonel knows who Valia is, and what he's been doing is on the hunt for them both, so it's only a matter of time before one is caught, and it's more likely to be him, as he's literally running about the woods trying to avoid detection in the area around Star City. He comes across Pavel, the other cosmonaut who was on the lunar mission with Sasha and is on the planned super secret Venus mission, And you can tell and you can see the gears in Valia's mind here when he runs into this guy and presents him with the opportunity that he has. Basically, just before Pavel shows up, Valia accepts that it is going to be all over for him, it's just a matter of time, and it looks as if he's about to hand himself in. After the encounter with Pavel, Valia returns to the site where the chief designer, Sasha, and the others are getting ready to go to Baikonur for the launch for the mission, and Pavel is mysteriously missing all of a sudden, and obviously this mission can't go ahead with one person down, so Valia gallantly offers to take his place. And at this point, the rest of them don't know that he's the spy, let alone a wanted man, so it seems that he's being a bit of a brave hero, stepping forward, giving up his marriage and his life in order to further the chief designer's plans. Now, I did think initially that Valia had killed Pavel, but he only tied him up, and that presents a bunch of problems I'm going to get to in a moment. So what about Tanya and Irina then? Well, she does manage to make it to Moscow to the house that Irina mentioned, where she's supposed to meet her, and she learns that Irina's family home is, well, a pretty important place. Because if you look at it compared to the standards that Tanya lives in, it's almost nearly palatial. It's very elegant, very big. There's lots of rooms, lots of couches, lots of paintings and pictures on the wall and all of that stuff compared to the normal sort of living standards we've seen that heroes of the state live in this show. But more importantly, we get a key fact about Irina and maybe her family and her history when we see that Tanya picks up a photograph of a big family group and we see the young Irina with Leonid Brezhnev, basically the head of the Soviet Union. Now, it isn't exactly clear what this relationship is. It kind of indicates that she is his daughter, or maybe that he's the father to Irina's daughter, which is a little bit more creepy. We actually see the woman who recruited Valia looking at a newspaper with Brezhnev on it at the start of last week's episode. And the episode ends with Anya reading a letter that Sasha left her. Remember, he couldn't do it before when he went to the moon, but he actually manages to seem to do it and get his feelings across to his wife, who he now sort of does have a caring and loving relationship with before he's gone on this super secret mission for the chief designer. So the crew's off Earth, Valia's escaped, and Tanya is following Irina's plan, but there's been some shocking revelations about who her friend's family is. And that's where the episode ends. So we got some pretty big twists and turns this week as the episode unfolded, and it became clear what Valia was going to do trying to escape all of this. We just had to wait for him to actually realise and do it, and I wonder where all of this is going to go next, and I don't mean the Venus mission. As I said, he didn't kill Pavel, and Pavel was expecting to go on this mission, so he's now stuck on Earth, and that's going to be a problem just as much as part of Valia's actions will be as well. Will Pavel keep his mouth shut, or is the chief designer going to have to deal with him in a bit of an unsavoury way? I suspect, given the fact that this week directly followed up last week's episode, and the fact that the Jupiter mission is going to be 9 months, we might get a bit of a time jump up to episode 6, but we're going to have to wait and see. But what's more shocking this week though is the Irina reveal. Is she the daughter, legitimate or otherwise, of the most powerful man in Russia? If so, this makes her maybe the most important and powerful person in the show. And we knew there was going to be some big reveals about her past and who her father's daughter and who her family were, but I don't think that anyone anywhere could have guessed that this was going to be one of them. If she isn't his daughter, like I said, it kind of suggests that maybe he's the father of her child, and given the age gap and how young Irina was in the photo, that's a bit of a grim thought. But after watching the old Irina in For All Mankind the last few seasons, we've learned a pretty important aspect of her as a person, and it was a blank that we never knew that we needed filled in, and I think that it did really work for this show. So yeah, I think we're going to get a time jump probably in the next episode or so because of the length of the Venus mission, and I suspect the Venus story is going to get tied up before the end of season 1. Now, we know that the mission has launched, and we know at the end of For All Mankind Season 5 something has happened that's slowly connecting the pieces of the puzzle on how these two stories might intertwine. So something is going to happen on this mission that's going to make the chief designer or Sergei want to follow up about it in the future, and we're about to see exactly what this might be, hopefully by the end of Season 1. Now, as I said, there's other questions as well. Why Venus? What's there? We know for all mankind that mankind basically has stopped at Mars at this point, at least by 2020 in that storyline. So that's about 60 or 70 years in the future at this point. So long-term living isn't really going to be sustainable on Venus. It might be one of the moons that he's interested in, but I just can't help but wonder what he hopes to gain by sending people to a planet that's uninhabitable by human life. Maybe the final destination isn't Venus and it's something else and it's yet to be revealed, but as always I want to hear what you guys think. What's going on with this Venus mission in particular, and what do you think Irina's relationship to Brezhnev is? Is she a daughter, legitimate or otherwise, or is it something a bit more unsavoury? If she is his daughter one way or another, that still raises the question about who the father is of her child, because Irina is very young to have a child that old. But yeah, we're only halfway through this season at this point, and I think episode 5 is by far the best episode of the season, and I keep saying it gets better and better. But yeah, let me know what you think's happened in this episode, what's going to happen next, and what you think's going to play out over the rest of the season in the comments below. If you've made it this far, as always, leave a like on the video, and if you haven't done it already, subscribe to the channel. And my name's Al, thanks for watching.